My family inherited mansions and fortunes. My cousins got stock portfolios and my siblings got cash. And me? I got a dusty old chest with a lock nobody could open. They all laughed, calling it the family joke. They'd send me smug photos from their new mansions and fancy resorts, asking if I was enjoying my box of splinters. That laughter stopped, dead in its tracks, the moment they found out what was really inside. It wasn't just treasure, it was the key to everything. And seeing their faces when they realized their multi-million-dollar inheritances were just a temporary loan I now had the power to call in, that was a sight to behold. The air in Mr. Abernathy's office was thick with old leather, decaying paper, and the sickening perfume of entitlement. It was the day of my grandfather Alistair's will reading, and the vultures had gathered. My brother Daniel sat across from me, a predatory smirk plastered on his face. He'd always seen me as the sentimental fool, the soft-hearted younger brother wasting his time on an old man's stories instead of networking. My sister Chloe sat beside him, tapping an impeccable nail against her designer handbag. She wasn't even pretending to be sad. She was just bored, waiting for this whole tedious formality to be over. My cousins, Mark and Sarah, were huddled together, whispering and darting their eyes around the room like they were mentally appraising the furniture. Then there was me, Liam, the quiet one, the one who actually spent time with grandfather Alistair in his final years. While they made their token holiday appearances with cheap bottles of wine, staying just long enough to be seen, I was the one making him tea and listening to his tales of sailing the world. I was the one holding his hand when the nights got long and his memories started to fade. We shared a bond they couldn't even comprehend. I truly expected nothing from his will. My time with him was the only inheritance I needed. Still, I'd hoped for a small acknowledgement, just a sign that our connection meant as much to him as it did to me. Mr. Abernathy, a man who looked as ancient as the books on his shelves, cleared his throat. His face was a mask of neutrality, but his sharp eyes seemed to miss nothing. He held up a document with a flair that felt a little too dramatic. "We are gathered to execute the last will and testament of Mr. Alistair Thorne," he began, his voice dry as dust. Alistair was a man of particular tastes, as you all know. He has laid out his bequests in a very specific manner. He started with my cousins. "To Mark and Sarah Thorne," he read, "my beloved nephew and niece, I bequeath the beach house in Malibu and my entire art collection."
Sarah gasped. They exchanged a look of pure, greedy triumph. The art collection alone was worth a fortune.
Next was my sister. "To my granddaughter, Chloe Thorne," Mr. Abernathy continued, "I bequeath the country estate, Northwood Manor, and a cash sum of $5 million. Chloe's bored facade shattered, replaced by a dazzling smile. $5 million and the family's ancestral home. She shot a glance at Daniel, a silent top that passing between them. Then, it was Daniel's turn. He leaned forward, that smirk on his face widening. "And to my grandson, Daniel Thorne," Abernathy read, "I bequeath my complete portfolio of technology stocks and the penthouse apartment in the city." Daniel let out a low whistle. Grandfather's tech portfolio was legendary. In an instant, he was fabulously wealthy. He leaned back and looked directly at me, his eyes gleaming with victory. Mr. Abernathy paused, letting the weight of the news settle. He shuffled his papers, and a deep silence fell as every eye in the room turned to me. This was it. The part where the family fool gets his pittance. "Finally," Mr. Abernathy said, his gaze briefly meeting mine. There was something in his eyes I couldn't quite read. "To my grandson, Liam Thorne." He paused again, and I could feel my family's amusement bubble to the surface.
"To Liam, who sat with me and saw value not in what I owned, but in who I was. I leave my old sea chest."
Silence. Then a snort from Daniel. That one sound broke the dam. Chloe let out a high-pitched giggle she tried and failed to stifle. Mark and Sarah were openly laughing. "His sea chest?" Daniel choked out. "His crusty old pirate box? Is this a joke?" "What's in it, Liam?" Chloe chimed in, her voice dripping with fake curiosity. "Doubloons? A treasure map?" The room erupted, It wasn't just laughter, it was a public confirmation of what they'd always believed, that I was worthless. I just sat there, frozen, the humiliation a hot flush creeping up my neck. It wasn't about the money, it was the crushing thought that my grandfather, the man I adored, had made me the punchline of his final joke. Mr. Abernathy didn't react. He reached under his desk and produced a single ornate brass key. "The chest is in storage," he said, his voice cutting through their laughter. "My clerk will arrange for its delivery." He slid the key across the polished desk. It stopped right in front of my trembling hands. I picked it up. The cold metal was a stark contrast to my burning skin. I couldn't look at anyone. "A key to a box of junk," Daniel sneered, getting up. "Perfect. Well, I'm off to see my new penthouse. Don't get any splinters, little brother." They filed out, their laughter echoing down the hall, a cruel chorus that followed me as I walked out into the cold afternoon, clutching a key to nothing. The chest arrived the next day. It was even more pathetic than I'd imagined. Sitting in the middle of my tiny apartment, it seemed to mock me. It was big, made of dark, weathered wood, and bound with rusted iron straps. It smelled faintly of salt and forgotten time. And the lock was the strangest part. It wasn't a keyhole. It was a round brass mechanism with 4 concentric rings, each etched with bizarre symbols, a mix of astrological signs and old maritime icons. The key Mr. Abernathy gave me was like a car key for a bicycle. It was completely useless against this lock. My phone became an instrument of torture, buzzing non-stop with their gloating. Chloe sent a picture of a sunset from Northwood Manor. Caption: "The view is just divine. Hope your box is comfy." Daniel sent a selfie popping champagne on his new balcony. "To new beginnings," he texted. "You should see this place, Liam. Oh, wait. For a week, I let the chest sit there, a monument to my humiliation. I'd walk past it, my stomach twisting with anger and grief. How could he do this to me? Finally, one rainy Tuesday, I couldn't stand it anymore. The anger had faded, leaving just a hollow sorrow. I decided to get rid of it. But as I knelt down, my hand brushed against the lid. I felt a pattern under the rough wood. The carvings weren't random at all. They were constellations. The Big Dipper, Orion's Belt, Cassiopeia, all the star patterns he'd taught me to identify from his porch. Then, a memory hit me. Grandfather smiling in his study. "The key isn't always what you think it is, Liam," he'd said. "Sometimes the key is knowledge. You just have to know how to turn it." My breath caught. It was a puzzle. The chest was the safe, but the brass key wasn't the combination. It was the first clue. I picked up the key again, really looking at it this time. It was heavy and ornate, but as I turned it over, my thumb brushed against a tiny set of markings etched into the handle. A date, October 12th. My heart started to pound. The date meant nothing to me. A date. A key that isn't a key. A lock with no keyhole. It was a classic Alistair Thorne puzzle. Then another memory hit me. My 18th birthday. He'd given me a small leather-bound journal. It was empty except for the first page, where he'd written, "For when you need to find your way." I'd tucked it away on a bookshelf. I scrambled to the shelf, pulling down the dusty journal. It wasn't a diary. It was a perpetual journal, with a page for every day of the year. It was the decoder ring for this whole mystery. I turned the crisp pages until I found it. October 12th.
The page was not blank.
Drawn in my grandfather's familiar script was a star chart labeled The Navigator's Passage, and beneath it, a 4-line poem. "When the sea speaks to the sky, and the North Star is your guide, let the serpent chart your course."
Where the hunter's secrets hide.
I read it again and again. It was a riddle, but it was also a recipe. The poem was the instructions, and the chest was the mixing bowl. North Star, serpent, hunter, Draco, Hydra, Orion. I looked back at the chest, at the constellations and the strange symbols on the lock. It all started to click into place. My grandfather hadn't betrayed me. He had trusted me. He trusted me to be the only one who would look closer, the only one who would remember his lessons, the only one who could solve it. A slow, determined smile spread across my face. The game was on.
The next hour was a blur of focus. I placed the journal next to the chest. The poem was the cipher, the star chart was the legend, and the chest was the lock.
When the sea speaks to the sky, the outermost ring had nautical symbols, an anchor, a ship's wheel. And the North Star is your guide. One carving on the lid was Polaris, the North Star. Using a compass app, I turned the chest so this carving pointed due north. Let the serpent chart your course. The journal's chart showed the constellation Draco, the serpent. I found its symbol on the second ring and turned it to align with the anchor symbol. A soft, mechanical click echoed in the room. Where the hunter's secrets hide. The final line, Orion, the hunter. I found its symbol on the third ring and the corresponding zodiac sign on the fourth, aligning them. Click, click. There was a final deep thud as heavy tumblers fell into place. I held my breath and lifted the lid. It opened with a soft, expensive sigh.
The inside was lined with deep blue velvet and divided into 3 pristine compartments. This was a vault.
The first compartment held a thick envelope sealed with the Thorne family crest on the front, to be opened only by Liam Thorne. Beside it lay a heavy, leather-bound folio, Master Deed and Articles of the Alistair Thorne Revocable Trust. My hands shook as I broke the seal on the letter. My dearest Liam, it began. If you are reading this, then you have proven what I have long known, that you are the only one worthy of my true legacy. I am sorry for the deception. The first will reading? A charade, my boy. A final test. An old, irrelevant will. I needed to see their true colors, and I needed to test you. You did not disappoint. I had to stop reading, my vision blurring. He hadn't forsaken me. The letter went on to explain the trust. It was like this. Years ago, my grandfather had put the entire family fortune, the houses, the stocks, everything, into one giant, impenetrable vault. The inheritances my family received were like IOUs. They thought they'd been given the gold, but they'd only been given a slip of paper that said they were entitled to it. That document in my hands, the master deed, was the only key to the master vault. The final page appointed me as the sole successor trustee, giving me absolute legal authority over every penny. I didn't just have a key, I now owned the entire bank. My head was spinning. The second compartment held the levers of power, a bearer share certificate for 51% of Thorne Holdings, the parent company that owned the real estate. It was like being handed the keys to the entire corporate kingdom. The third compartment was the most astonishing. It was filled with his old captain's logbooks. These are more than memories, Liam, he wrote. He explained that years ago, he'd secretly amassed a massive fortune in cryptocurrency. The logbooks were the map. Certain entries contained coordinates that were part of a complex puzzle leading to a digital wallet. He had created a ghost ship laden with a treasure that dwarfed everything else combined, and he had just given me the star charts to find it. I leaned back, the letter trembling in my hand. Shock, disbelief, and then a slow, cold wave of absolute clarity. My grandfather hadn't left me a joke. He had left me an arsenal. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was a coronation, and he had just handed me the power to set things right. The laughter that had echoed in my ears for a week suddenly sounded very, very distant. My first call was to Mr. Abernathy. He answered on the first ring.
Abernathy Law.
It's Liam Thorne, I said, my voice low and even. I've opened the chest. There was a brief pause, then his voice came on the line, filled with warmth. Mr. Thorne, Liam, I've been waiting for your call. I trust you found your grandfather's message.
I did, I replied.
Excellent, he breathed with genuine relief. Alistair would be so pleased. He always said you had his spark. I need to schedule a meeting, I said. Tomorrow morning, in your office, everyone, Daniel, Chloe, Mark, and Sarah. Consider it done, Mr. Thorne, he said. I'll inform them it's a mandatory final meeting regarding the estate. The next morning, I walked into the same conference room. This time I felt no anxiety, only a calm, unnerving purpose. On the mahogany table, I placed the heavy folio of the Master Trust. They trickled in, annoyed. Daniel swaggered in last. What is this, Liam? He asked, smirking. Did you finally pry open your box of junk? Don't tell me. He left you a single silver coin to go with it.
I just looked at Mr. Abernathy. He nodded.
Thank you all for coming, Abernathy began, his voice now filled with formidable authority. This meeting has been called by Mr. Liam Thorne in his new capacity as successor trustee of the Alistair Thorne Revocable Trust. Blank stares. I'm sorry, the what? Chloe asked impatiently. The will was read. Abernathy gave a thin smile. The document you heard last week was superseded. To put it simply, imagine your grandfather owned a large apartment building. He didn't give you deeds to your individual apartments. He merely gave you permission to live in them. All those assets, the penthouse, the manor, the stocks, are, and have always been, owned by the trust. They were never yours. As of yesterday, he said, tapping the folio, Mr. Liam Thorne was given the deed to the entire building. He is your new landlord. The silence was deafening. It was the sound of 4 fortunes evaporating. Daniel's face went from tan to a pasty white. Then came the rage. You snake, Daniel screamed, lunging to his feet. You plotted this.
Chloe burst into ugly, furious sobs.
He can't do this. It's ours. You're a thief, Liam.
I remained seated, silent. I would advise you all to sit down, Abernathy said, his voice like cracking ice. Alistair was meticulous. The trust is an ironclad fortress. Any beneficiary who contests it is, by its own terms, immediately and irrevocably disinherited. A challenge wouldn't just be fruitless, it would be financially ruinous. That shut them up. The fight drained from Daniel's eyes, replaced by abject terror. Only then did I speak. He gave you a test, I said, looking at each of them, and you failed, spectacularly. You proved him right. I let that sink in. The days of unchecked luxury are over. The houses, the apartments, you may continue to reside in them as tenants. You will pay rent to the trust. You'll get an allowance, enough to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. The private jets and reckless spending end today. This isn't a punishment. This is the new reality. These are my terms. Their worlds had crumbled. Daniel sank back into his chair, a broken man. Chloe was weeping silently, her perfect makeup ruined. Their laughter had turned to ash in their mouths.
I stood up, collected the folio, and walked to the door. I didn't look back.
Walking out into the bright morning sun, I didn't feel a rush of victory. There was no elation, no glee. Instead, I felt the immense, sobering weight of responsibility. My grandfather hadn't given me a weapon for revenge. He had entrusted me with his life's work, a legacy to be protected from the very people who were supposed to cherish it. He gave me the power not to destroy them, but to save our family from their own worst instincts. The old sea chest wasn't a joke. It was the ultimate vote of confidence, a puzzle only trust and memory could solve. He knew I wouldn't seek to burn everything down. He knew I would build, and standing there, with the keys to the kingdom in my hands, I made a silent promise to his memory. I wouldn't let him down. So what would you have done? Would you have been stricter or more lenient? Would you have sold everything and just disappeared? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more.